In this episode of Detroit Performs, an artist who uses bright colors and collage in his masterpieces, a fine artist and museum curator, and out of aluminum becomes eye-catching sculptures. It's all ahead on this edition of Detroit Performs.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm DJ Oliver, and today we're at the world-renowned Detroit Institute of Arts. This museum is where hundreds of thousands of people come to learn about artists from the past and present each year. Our lead story is about an artist who was first inspired as a young Detroit public school student by visiting this Egyptian exhibit right behind me here. Let's take a look at Marcus Glenn.
I think being able to contribute to the world in a positive fashion is the most important thing. I mean, here in the downtown Detroit area, making positive things happen visually. I grew up in West Detroit, west side of Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. My mom introduced me to art, but I was really intrigued with art in the kindergarten. Started early on. I just liked to doodle and sketch, so it was just a passion of mine. Art was always around me. I looked at life a little different. When I looked at a stoplight, it looked like art to me, not just equipment to stop you. I looked at the intricate design, and I think I wanted to be a part of that whole creative process in my own way. The first art I was exposed to was the Egyptian art, the collection at the DIA, and being able to see how the artists of that time carved at the stone and had a bas relief where you could see the art from different angles and different dimensions. I use a lot of fabrics and different textile papers. For me, I was always gravitated to things that had a lot of textiles and patterns and things of that nature. So that sort of spills into the creative process of my artwork. The process is just taking in life and being able to infuse those things that I appreciate and kind of put it into my art. And sometimes life is not always pretty, and that's the thin line you have to. How do you make negative things or things that's going on in the world? How do you put it into your art and make it appealing or make it something that's viewable? And so a lot of artists, they take it in its raw form, but me, I'm not necessarily that raw in my approach creatively. So sometimes I'll subtly put things in that maybe through a collage imagery that I'll use, but being able to balance that whole creative process, life, and just being creative, it's a thin line. It's a thin line between like love and hate. Being a humble individual in life is not a sign of weakness, but it helps you stay balanced in everything that's going on in the world today. And even in Detroit, you know, I'm a product of Detroit, born and raised here, and now, you know, we have some positive things going on. And I had the opportunity to move and leave our great city, but I decided to stay here. Moving my studio down here in the downtown Detroit area, Corktown, I thought it would be a positive thing to help revitalize the city and kind of help things take root again. And so it's like you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I kind of keep my my creative process focused on that light. I want the viewer to feel the passion, the love that I'm trying to portray in the piece. And that's why being with Park West Gallery, the largest art gallery right now in the world, we're able to showcase our art on a major platform. And through this process, they try to help us to tell stories. One of the intricate symbolisms that I kind of incorporate in my pieces is the floorboards. I make them multicolored and always say that symbolizes the palette of God, because when we look at nature or even mankind, God did it in such a variety. We get the different trees, the different flowers, and so I believe once we master the concept of love, truly the world will be a better place. I'm very, what you would call a figurative abstract artist, but I spill into just known objects and different things of that nature. And I may create a piece that's taken off. A lot of people have been asking me to kind of paint a heart. I just didn't want to paint the heart the way it's always been portrayed. This is the actual piece we're gonna create here. It's called A Heart of Love. So this time we're gonna use a green background as our base. And you paint from light or dark to light. Creatively, you start to see the colors just kind of blending. So you sort of sketch the heart onto here. And when you look at the painting, I tell the viewer the largest heart in the composition would be like them peering into a mirror and they look at themselves. And they would be the reflection of that heart. And over the heart is going to be a crown. So I think for us to accept love or want love to come to us, we have to love ourselves first and foremost. And so that large heart would be you accepting yourself and you crown yourself with love, and then you begin to feel the love come back, and then you can share the love. So you start to see little hearts popping up, meaning that love is being displayed throughout your life. And of course, the most important thing is the butterflies. I think we all start in a cocoon, and if we nurture life and love, we blossom into this beautiful creature. And so there's a technique that I use, it's called the chaos. You kind of just splash the painting. And that is a painting entitled The Heart of Love. It's an amazing, feeling to tap into who you are as a person. And then it's a blessing to be able to share your gift with others and others to receive that gift in such a positive light. It was an amazing experience to be part of Grammy's Biggest Night. They only choose one visual artist per year to really represent music's biggest night. So to get that honor, I mean, it was something. The details was that the gramophone was their iconic imagery. So I just thought I would do a piece with the gramophone kind of floating out in space and sort of having my signature keyboards kind of flowing throughout the composition, and then you can kind of feel the music spilling out of the gramophone. Because I always say that music is our universal language. It's been an amazing journey, and I think the journey is just beginning. Seeing myself walking into this beautiful studio and being able to create, it keeps me humble, it keeps me balanced, and it keeps me creative. I think I'm showing Detroit that there are a lot of positive things here in the city. There are creative people here in this city, and we're making an impact on life. I mean, the Grammys are in California, and they found me, and I'm here in Detroit, and I think that was special. So I'm here in the D, and I think I'm gonna stay in the D.
You can learn more about Marcus Glenn and all the artists featured here on DetroitPerforms.org. Dabls is an esteemed fine artist, museum curator, and historian who has been lecturing on African material culture to international audiences for over 30 years. Let's check him out.
In 1994, I founded an African bead museum, Mbad African Bead Museum. And the goal was to exhibit the history as it relates to African beads. I had collected beads for about 15 years, and what occurred to me is that some of these items I had, the general public would never see them, because the nature of a collection is not to say, I have this collection, come in and look at it. So I wanted these things to be seen especially by African children and European children also. Most of Africa, before it was cut up into these 52 countries, they all had bees as the central part of the culture. The bees was used to communicate specific information. They were used for initiation, rites of passage. You could determine status. There were bees that was meant for only royalties or members of the royal family to wear. Bees were given to young ladies to let everyone know that they were being initiated, likewise with men. In fact, from age 3 on, every 3 years was marked by the use of bees. But what fascinated me more so than anything was this concept of these bees being magic and medicine. These bees here are from the African trade period. These bees date back to the 1500s. They are the oldest color of red. They're called greenheart because the center of these bees is green. These are the oldest bees that were brought into Africa out of the European countries. But Mali, Mesopotamia, Morocco, and Egypt also had bees, and their bees were known for the ability of protecting you against the evil eye. These are eye bees, and they would protect the wearer, mainly from someone saying something that would spoil your name or hurt your credibility, because your word was the most powerful thing you had. You didn't have credit, you had your word. So the eye bees would protect you from the unknown and also protect your word. These bees here are about 800 years old. Okay, why don't we take a trip outside to see our outside installation, which covers a whole city block, and it's an extension of the Bead Museum. In order for us to have a place for the community to come together in a garden, we have a stage out there, and on this stage, the people in the community can use it for free. Behind the stage is the first installation we built, which is called Iron Teaching Rocks How to Rust. It's a metaphor that deals with the relationship between Africans and Europeans over the last 500 years. One day I was out there, I picked up a piece of concrete slab that had an iron rod protruding out of it. And that iron rod had stained the brick. So I said, oh, Iron Teaching Rocks How to Rust. So that began the genesis of the installation out there, which is a very serious part of our history that we can't really put into history. We try to keep it alive and attach personal events to it. So, but history is supposed to teach you not to keep you all upset and angry and stressed out. In the eyes of the Nkisi, there are mirrors. In the abdomen, there are mirrors. So the mirrors reflect negative energy. So if you're trying to do harm to anything out here, you're going to see an image of yourself and run away. Because most people are good. They don't want to see themselves when they're doing bad deeds. 14 years ago, I didn't know how the community would react to this art. We have a tendency to want things to remain the same. So I put all this other world stuff out here to send people on an imaginary trip for a few minutes. And that's enough energy to carry you a week, just to break out of reality for a little while. The Nkisi, the circle and the dot up top, you probably recognize it from Target. But Target copyrighted, but it's an ancient African symbol that represents all of those who came before us, our ancestors. Kind of simple with the way symbolism just simplifies stuff. All the dots and things that you see out there, that represents all the children. So you are always sandwiched between those who came before you and those you're preparing to leave this place for. Whatever I say to you about these beads, you will not be able to erase that and you won't forget it, because that bead would act as a trigger to remind you of this day and what occurred here this day.
You can learn more about Dabls and all the artists featured here on DetroitPerforms.org. Now, let's check out some upcoming events happening in and around Detroit. To discover more events in Greater Detroit, visit ixity.com. Artist Noah Deledda spends his days pushing dense and geometric shapes into aluminum cans. And the result is something unlike we've ever seen before. We're featuring the Irony in Aluminum project, which is all about taking the ordinary and transforming it into something astonishing.
It's the art of possibility. It's the idea that something we're all familiar with can be expressed in a way that's unfamiliar, in a way that's significant. People come up with their own theories. They imagine a machine that does it, or a robot, or some kind of elaborate press, or a vacuum system. And I always get a kick out of it because it's really the most simple idea that gets overlooked. I call it Irony in Aluminum, which is, it's really just a description of the media, whereas, previously I was painting, so I would say, this is oil on canvas. Irony in Aluminum just seemed like a fitting name, as well as a slight play on words, with aluminum being a metal and iron being a metal. One of the most common responses is people say they've never seen anything like this. But one of the ironies is that they have seen something like this. It's just in a way that they don't recognize. The irony that a normally destructive force, such as crushing, can actually be creative, that can be presented as art. That something familiar can be presented in a way that's unfamiliar. I was just out of boredom during a car trip to Orlando. I was in the back seat. I'd finished a Red Bull. Had nothing to do. I didn't have an iPhone to mess around with, so I just started fiddling with this can that had been partially crushed, and I noticed that in a way the dents would allow certain shapes to form. They would allow themselves to be manipulated. At the time, I just made a mental note to return back to the idea at a later time. I applied some geometry, some artistic principles of repetition and shape and pattern. And it really started to grow. It really started to become something more than I thought it would. Red Bull has this art competition that they had been doing in different cities. It's called Art of Can. So I entered a sculpted Red Bull can, and it won the first prize in their contest. So that was really encouraging, that other people were receptive to it, that it was something it was worth pursuing. But it wasn't until 2 years after that, I don't know what caused it, but just the idea popped in my head to use a blank can. And I'd always loved polished aluminum since I was a kid. Shiny metal was just something that was just intriguing to me. I would take my Matchbox cars and rub them on the cement so they would be shiny metal. I just thought that was the coolest thing. When I sanded down my first can, I was instantly brought back to that. It was just the finish itself was something that was just so beautiful to me. When I used a blank can to sculpt, the result was just amazing to me. I felt it brought it to the next level, into something that could really be presented as fine art. It was a turning point for me as an artist, just to kind of go with with what I was feeling in a way that I hadn't ever had a chance to before. So just as an artist, just to get to that point was something that was very important to me. I built a machine that is kind of a lathe where I install the can in the machine and it spins the can, and I sand it while I squirt it with water, so it's a wet sanding process. It removes the printed layer off the can, and then I polish it, I empty it, and then I start sculpting. The main technique is using the tip of my thumbnail on the surface of the can to create a score, to push a dent a certain way, to create a ridge. The technique is an ambidextrous one. A lot of the movements you need to mirror both left and right. I've always been an ambidextrous person, so it's nice to have something that can really sink into on the right and left side. There is a physical limit to their creation. Because I use my thumbs, they went numb for like 2 days at one point because of overuse. I can't really produce more than 2 sculptures in a day without suffering nerve damage. If you came to my house, you'd be inundated by half-sculpted Red Bull cans. I keep them in storage so that I can refer back to many of them. I call it sketching. Many of the sketches are ones that need to be revisited. Many of them are ideas that need to be further developed. Many of them I just do just to keep my thumbs in shape. One of the best things about the sculptures is their tendency towards variety, which keeps it interesting.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Detroit Performs. As always, for more arts and culture, head to DetroitPerforms.org, where you'll find featured videos, blogs, and information on upcoming arts events. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to thank the Detroit Institute of Arts for hosting us today. Make sure you come out and be inspired by art yourself. Until next Tuesday, get out there and show the world how Detroit performs, y'all. I am DJ Oliver. Thanks for watching, guys.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.